Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of List Tinkering. My name is Lance, and I am with Wartilio. And today I've got a list from Mon Innocentes. He sent a Flesh Eater Court list, which I really like. I really enjoy Feck in 4th edition. I know that the stats don't really show it right now, but I think that this has so much play in it. And let me go on to the list without further ado. So this is a Lords of the Manor list, which allows him to bring back an additional model every time he uses an ability to bring back a model, which I think is very good. It is a total of 1970 points. It's got 3 drops. The spell lore is Lore of Madness, the prayer lore is Rites of Delusion, and the manifestation lore is the Aetherwrought Machinery. It's a very inspired choice. So the General's Regiment is Usharan with a Vargulf Courtier. As you can see, all of the regiments are color-coded for your viewing pleasure. It's got an Abhorrent Gorewarden, who also has 2 units of Morbheg Knights and Royal Beast players in the same unit. Lastly, it has Grand Justice Goremain with 2 units of Crypt Guards and a reinforced unit of Morbheg Knights. The Vargulf Courtier is the one that has Savage Beyond Reason and Charnel Vestments. Savage Beyond Reason allows it to have a ability that when it crits, it actually allows it to crit for 2 hits on 6s, but with 6 Noble Deed points, it allows it to have crit mortals, which I think is very good. It's a good trait, but I think that it's very hard to pull off. And its artifact is Eternal Vestments, which gives this army a priest. Very good for banishing and allowing it access to some of the prayers. Now, I played this list a couple of times, and it's performed well both times. It's very strong. I think the core foundation of having Usharan take the center and having the Morbheg Knights be able to take the flanks and control them, while the Gorewarden allows you to punish your opponent for deploying or spreading out too much and being able to move in with the Morbheg Knights is actually very strong. This list, I don't think I've really lost a game with this list yet. It's very good with several units of Crypt Guard to kind of work as screens, while at the same time having the Royal Beast players over here to help Usharan duel against enemy monsters. Now, while I really like this list, I actually have a few issues with it. First off, I think that Grand Justice Goremain, while a very interesting and fluffy narrative-like character, it's interesting because his ability is that he can he can cast judgment on someone, and on a 3+ he can do multiple effects. Like an example of which is he has his Delusions of Justice served on a 3+. He can add wound rolls for combat attacks that target a unit. Friendly non-monster Flesh Eater Courts can use charge abilities. They can run and charge into that unit. That's the second ability. The third one is, while the target unit's in combat with a friendly abhorrent, you can add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by Feck units that target that unit. And the last ability is, if the target destroyed a friendly abhorrent in the battle, it adds 1 damage of melee weapons used by friendly Feck units that target that unit. I think that what is interesting about this list is if you sacrifice the Gorewarden and bait out the ability of Regicide, the 4th ability that gives +1 damage, it could potentially make a lot of these units score like ridiculous amounts of damage. Like if you're fighting a Mega Gargant army, for example, and you sacrifice the Gorewarden to one of the models, you can make it so that all of these do plus extra damage, which would be bonkers because Feck has all of the volume. However, in my games, Goremain is the weakest performer, as he needs a 3+ in order to enact its ability. Not very good in my opinion. And on average, I think you're putting Goremain on the Charnel Throne to generate Noble Deed points. And having only his melee attack to try and generate Noble Deed points outside of the Charnel Throne, it makes for a very, very inconsistent Noble Deed point generator. Secondly, the Vargulf Courtier, while it is fast, and I can imagine it being a very interesting unit for doing take the flanks early on, I think that it doesn't generate Noble Deed points fast enough. And I think that it's too fragile and too large and slow a unit to circle around your opponent's flanks in order to bully your opponent's heroes, as it seems to be meant to do. Several attacks with high damage and high rend. So, in my opinion, the Vargulf Courtier's biggest advantage in this list is I put him next to Usharan, and he makes for a very efficient bodyguard because it stays within 6 inches. Usharan likes being in combat, and I get the bodyguard ability off. So overall, I really like this list. However, I would like to make a few changes. Aetherot, the Aetherot Aetherot machineries spells are fine actually. Uh, right now, Morbid Conjuration is the strongest, but I can see Chronomatic Cogs giving -1 to hit on Ushuran to be very effective. And unfortunately, with Feck having lots of good spells, and Ushuran himself having a really fun spell that targets centerpieces and lets them attack enemy units next to them with a melee profile from that target, I think that one spellcaster in this list might not bring out the list's full potential. So, in my opinion, what I would do is I would change out Gormain for an Abhorrent Cardinal, and I would switch out the Vargulf Courtier for an Archregent. Now, why is that so? The Archregent is one of the best units in Feck. It is such a good unit because of its spell. There's a Carrion Call there. So on a casting roll of 6, you move a Flesh Eater Core unit D6 after it is set up. And this synergizes extremely well with the core of the Morbheg Knights and the Abhorrent Gorewarden. You can use the Gorewarden's ability to pick up 2 of the Knights units, teleport them around, and then if they use Carrion Call, they can move additional D6. Which, if you pair that with Ushuran's Delusion, that gives them +1 and run and charge, you can effectively have a very reliable way to charge with the unit of 6 Morbheg Knights, making your opponent have to bunker up or punish them severely for spreading out. Now, the Abhorrent Cardinal is also really good. It's a good priest, and on a 4-up, it can actually generate more Noble Deeds points for something else. One of the things I really like about Feck, with the synergies of the Cardinal and the Throne, and the spellcasters in general, is that they generate Noble Deed points pretty quickly. Now, the Cardinal also acts as a priest, which means that you could give the Charnel Vestments to the Gorewarden here instead. So by doing so, you effectively have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different sources of banishment, making this list extremely good against manifestations without really harming much of its action economy, because the Abhorrent Regents can cast 2 spells, Ushuran can cast 2 spells, freeing him up to use Cogs, while the Abhorrent Archregent uses Carrion Call and probably Morbid Transformation. Ushuran probably casting Transformation as well. And the Gorewarden here can just banish things and give a 5-up ward maybe to the Morbheg Knights while generating Noble Deeds in itself. And it creates a much cleaner kind of rotation for the list. I would also change a couple of things with the list in terms of where you assign regiments. Why? So, I would put 1 unit of Crypt Guard with Ushuran instead. And I would make it so that the Abhorrent Gorewarden is the one with all the Morbheg Knights. The Archregent will serve as a 4th drop, making this effectively a 4-drop, which is fine. And I'll explain why in a second. Now, why would I make these specific changes? I think the Gorewarden being with the Morbheg Knights is very effective because of his ability where he picks up to 2 units of Morbheg Knights and teleports across the map. So when you place down the Gorewarden in deployment, you are effectively telegraphing the efficient parts of the map to put the Morbheg Knights down when you deploy. If you put them separately, you're basically revealing more information to your opponent than you need to. However, if you are deploying all 3 of these units together, then it basically lays out, it gives the same information to your opponent that you normally would if you had deployed them. Basically it reveals all the information at the same time without revealing anything extra as part of the game plan, because I treat the Morbheg Knights and the Abhorrent Gorewarden as like one part of the list that works really well together and works independently of the rest of the army. The Abhorrent Archregent being an only drop for me is fine, because more often than not, the Archregent or the Cardinal actually works as the single drop fine, depending on whichever one you prefer to put in the Charnel Throne. Now, what I would normally do is I would get the Cardinal, and I would have him be the single drop. And if my opponent makes me drop first, I would just put the Cardinal on the throne, and that's all the information that they're going to get. I'll put them behind the throne, and they still won't know where the rest of your army is. Ushuran being with the Crypt Guard, I think is fairly useful because the Crypt Guard make it have a fairly small base and unit size, so you can effectively use them as a bodyguard unit. You're almost never really going to use them for priority target, and if you do, it's only if really effective if Usharan gets to have his 6 noble deed points to give them 41 attacks, which I think is kind of bonkers. I think this unit also gets improved if you give them the Morbid Transformation and give them +1 to wound. You give them all out attack. You get the noble deed points +1 attack, +1 to hit, +1 to wound. And if you make them an honor guard, you can give them extra rend for charging against the opponent's best unit. Or you make them bodyguard to make Usharan even more survivable. Then you put in the chronomatic cogs there as you would with the Aetheroth machineries to give Usharan -1 to hit. And then with the bodyguard, -1 attack to units engaged Usharan, who has a ginormous base. Lastly, this last drop over here is really more to when you want to reveal your screens. You put down Royal Beast players, and you don't want this to be in the same drop as Usharan, because normally Usharan is a threat to many different opponents, and your opponent might not put a monster to pit against Usharan because he will basically usually outduel them with all the debuffs you can give. So you want to have the Royal Beast players be a separate drop from Usharan, so you can deploy them on the map relative to where your opponent's monsters are. On average, I actually suspect that Usharan would usually be down the center line. The Morbheg Knights would usually take the flanks, with the opponent Gorewarden maybe being in the back with the Morbheg Knights here to teleport in. The Cardinal would be with wherever the throne is. And this unit, this block over here, will be deployed based on where the Crypt Guards want to perform an extra screen, and the Royal Beast players want to be deployed in order to match up with the enemy monster. I think that while Feck has a relatively low win rate right now, according to the meta stats, I think it is also because the majority of players aren't really playing it, and a lot of them are playing Night Hunt. A lot of the really good players aren't really playing Feck in international tournaments at the moment. However, I think that Feck is really strong because they can play into both being able to outdrop your opponent and play into when your opponent outdrops you. You're as a Death Star army with very strong flanking potential. Your opponent's game plan doesn't really impede your game plan very much. In fact, it just makes you very adaptable. In most of my games, Usharan reaches 6 noble deed points very easily. The Morbheg Knights usually get countercharged and die. Then I just resummon a couple of them, and I would use Carrion Call to make them go for enemy support heroes and kill them. Overall, very solid list. I hope that this video was insightful and helps you improve your game in Age of Sigmar and the Mortal Realms. We hope that you enjoy this video. If you like the video, give it a like and subscribe for more content. With that, thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video. If you want to submit one of your lists for list tinkering, for us to test the list out and give some advice on how to better bring out the potential of the list, send it to our email, wartilio@gmail.com, which should be in the description below. Take care, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.